G'day, Ben here from On Three Legs, and in this video we're going to take a look at the rule of thirds and how you can use it to improve your photography. You've probably heard of the rule of thirds, and you're at this video because you've decided you want to investigate a little bit about what it is all about. And it's probably one of those rules in photography that's a good rule to abide by in a lot of cases. And there are times though when you may break the rule, but funnily enough, when I was going through all my images trying to find some examples, I noticed that 98% of my images actually use the rule of thirds to a T, and so I'm going to show you how that works with some of my images in a second. First of all, before we do that, let's explain what the rule of thirds are. Now you'll see in front of you is a black picture, and I've got grid lines on that black picture, and the reason I've done that is just to highlight to you how the rule of thirds works. And this here is called a grid, and in Photoshop you can set your grid up to actually look like the rule of thirds or be the rule of thirds. What I've gone and done is I've gone and put some lines on here just to really make it stand out, and we're just going to have a quick chat about what they are and why they're important. So there's two horizontal lines, as you can see there. The two horizontal lines are what's called equidistant from the top to the bottom. So they're three equal spaces in between the top, the first line, the second line, and the bottom. And then we do the same thing with the vertical line. So once again, equidistant spaces, and we've got 9 areas of equal size. Now the reason why it's important is that for good composition in photography, we want to place our subject or the subject of importance in our image on one of these intersections, or at least on one of the lines. And I'll put my little figure up there that I just created, and you'll see that makes the image look a lot better if the figure is off center. And you can see here that's what's happening with this particular image here. You can also see that the figure's head is on the intersection, the body is on the line, and it makes a lot more sense. Now if, for example, this was a real life photo of somebody walking from left to right, I would have all this space on the right. If they were going to be walking the other direction, so let's just move them over this side, I would have them walking from right to left. You would have the space over here. Now it doesn't really matter whether it's right on the intersection, near the intersection, something like that. You just want it to be as close as you can, rather than just sticking them in the middle. And you'll see what happens when you stick the subject in the middle. There's a lot of space behind and in front, and it's not as effective. So you're really looking to get them on that sort of plane there, somewhere around the intersection if you can, and you'll see that it just makes a big difference to your photos. And I'm going to show you some images now so you can sort of get a feel for what it is I'm talking about, and how this rule of thirds applies to real images. So let's start here. This one here is a model. I was actually at a Panasonic Lumix event, and so we were just trying it. This was shot with a GX7 with, I think it's a 42.5mm f1.2. That's neither here nor there, but pretty good image for that camera. But the composition is not the greatest, simply because there was a lot of photographers pointing a camera at this poor model, and she was trying to keep her eyes on everybody, and everyone sort of got a shot. But as you can see, the rule of third is definitely at work here. She's definitely on that line, and you can see that as far as the rule of third, she's not in the middle, she's on that line. And if I bring up the other the horizontal lines, you'll see the intersections are also on her body. So you can see that here the rule of thirds is at work, and she's on the line. Let's have a look at the next one. So here's a lighthouse here, and you can see this one here, the lighthouse is right on the intersection. So once again, the rule of thirds are in play here. Even though we've got such a dominant foreground, the lighthouse still really stands out, and that's because of the rule of thirds playing its part here. And you can see the lighthouse is definitely on the line and on the intersection, as where nothing else really does sit on anything predominantly. So you sort of can, I know that these two intersections has the foreground, but it's sort of filling the bottom of the image. This one here though is definitely on the intersection, and we can see that makes that different. Now this is an interesting one here. This is a picture of Sydney's harbour for sunrise, and you'll see there's a couple of things at play here. First of all, one of the common mistakes people make in photo composition with landscape photography is to put the horizon in the middle of the image, like right across the middle, and it just doesn't look good. So here you'll see that we've got our rule of thirds at play, and our horizon is actually on a line from the rule of thirds, and you'll see that the Opera House is on this intersection here from the rule of thirds. So once again, rule of thirds play here. Now, if my sky wasn't interesting in this image, I probably would have had the horizon up here on the top line. So let me just bring that back again. So I would have had the horizon up there, and I would have had a lot more water in the foreground. So it just depends on what's going on as to what you want to include in your shot, but it certainly gives you a good idea of where to point your camera if you're shooting something. Let's have a look at this one here. This one here is another good lesson, because this one's got a very strong foreground. As you can see, it's got this brick wall with an opening which frames a building, an old building. And what we've done here is this old building is on that line and in that intersection there. So you can see, even with a really strong foreground, you still need to be thinking about the rule of thirds. And because of the fact that building is on that intersection, it doesn't get overpowered by the strong foreground. So you still got your image shining through. Now this one here is an interesting one. I picked this one because it doesn't follow the rule of thirds per se. In fact, this one's more of a symmetrical shoot. Now this is a martini bar booth on a cruise boat. And I was looking for things to shoot, and it's quite, you can't shoot anything off the boat. It's slower shutter speeds, so I thought I'd do something. This is actually HDR, but as you can see, there is nothing at all on the intersections in this image here. And the reason this image works is because it's symmetrical. So sometimes you're not going to use the rule of thirds. You can see, though, I haven't put the booth in the middle of the photo. It's still using a little bit of the rule of thirds. Maybe the seats are on this line here, so that does give it some sort of image appeal, but it's not really following the rule at all. So that's an example of an image that doesn't follow the rule of thirds, but it still works. So you don't have to necessarily follow the rules. Here's one here. This is a piano that was at the Vivid Festival, the Light Festival in Sydney, and with this one here, it was really about waiting for the right moment. But as you can see, if we bring up those vertical lines, the Sydney Opera House, the guy who's singing is on that line. And if we bring in the other intersections, you can see, right near this intersection here is the guy's head in the Sydney Opera House. So really, that's the area of the image that your eye would be drawn to, and it works really, really well. I would have probably composed it a little bit lower to put his head or put the intersection down a bit lower on his head. But in this instance, once again, stretching the rule a little bit, I wanted to get the top of the piano, which was like a perspex top on top of this piano. I wanted to get it leading as a leading line in from the corner, and then the reflection of the keyboard with his fingers. So sometimes you've got to stretch or move the rule around a little bit to suit what it is you're trying to achieve. Another one here. This one here is some swans in Canberra, Lake Burley Griffin. As you can see, two swans here. This is almost a panoramic image. Same thing there on the intersection right there. So you can see why that works. And typically I don't think about this as I'm shooting images, so you don't have to think about worrying about whether or not you've got to continually think about the rule of thirds as you shoot your photos. It will come naturally after a while, but if you need help, if you think your composition could do with some work, this is a great place to start. As you can see, this one here, the rock ledge is on that line there, which is really does make it strong. And then because it's a waterfall, there's a lot going on. That's really the strongest part of the falls there, and the part that I wanted to really stand out. And if you have a look, we'll take the lines away, you can see that the placement of that just works really nicely. And once again, the rule of thirds at work there. And we've got one more here, and this is a really good example of another one where it's got strong foreground and a huge distraction from the main subject. The main subject on the rule of thirds lines is the Opera House, and I mean the Harbour Bridge plays a part, but the Opera House still stands out. And the reason for that is because if I bring that back up, you can see that the Opera House is on that line. See there? The Opera House is on that intersection there. So same thing. Just those two lines, and you'll see it's right on that intersection. So it sort of gives you an idea of how the rule of thirds works and how you can use this in your photography. And I'm sure it'll make a difference to what you do, because it'll make your composition a lot more appealing when you take photos. So hopefully that's helped you. If you enjoyed watching the video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button up to the top right hand side. Head to my website on3legs.com. I've got a free ebook there called the 10 Tips to Better Photos. More than welcome to go and download a copy of that. It's absolutely gratis on behalf of me, and 10 tips in there plus a little bonus tip as well. So grab that ebook and download it today.